Hello, everyone, and welcome to Textile Talks. I'm Carolyn Ducey, the artist B. James, Curator of Collections here at the International Quilt Museum, and we're delighted to have you with us for a wonderful program today. The International Quilt Museum is located at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and we proudly steward and exhibit the world's largest collection of quilts and related textiles that span 5 centuries and over 65 countries. In fact, our mission and our passion is to build a global collection and audience that celebrates the cultural and artistic significance of quilts. And if this is your passion too, and you aren't already a member, please consider joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize and thank the organizations that partner with the International Quilt Museum to bring you Textile Talks each week: the Quilt Alliance, Studio Art Quilt Associates, and Surface Design Association. We're honored to bring you free and inspiring program with the help of our sponsors, and we couldn't do it without their generosity and the generosity of viewers like you. Just a couple things today to remember. If you have questions of our wonderful guests today, please type those in the Q&A area and use the chat box for greeting others and for the survey that you'll have an opportunity to take after our program today. If you prefer not to see notifications from the chat, you can click on the chat button and toggle them on or off. And we are also doing live captioning, making Textile Talks accessible to a wider audience. And if you prefer not to view captions, you can also turn those off. And I think Lucy can give us some information on how to do that as well. So it's my honor today to introduce our speaker, Sue Reich. And Sue is going to be speaking us today about World War I quilts, the Sue Reich Collection, which is an exhibition currently open here at the International Quilt Museum. Sue Reich began quilting as a young child at her grandmother's farmhouse in Crawford County, Pennsylvania. After moving to Connecticut in 1980, she participated in the Connecticut Quilt Search Project and was instrumental in the writing and publication of Quilts and Quiltmakers covering Connecticut. This experience launched her career in writing books on quilt history, particularly World War I quilts, World War II quilts, presidential and patriotic quilts, and various other quilt subjects. Sue is the author of 6 quilt history books. In 2002, Sue donated both her World War I and World War II collections to the International Quilt Museum, and we are so grateful for that. Sue also plays a role as president of the board of director of Quilts of Valor, a program whose mission is to cover service members and veterans touched by war with comforting and healing quilts of valor. And we're so happy to have you here today with us, Sue.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's good to be here.
It's wonderful to be here and share your research is just amazing, Sue. And the collection the multiple collections that you've built is also astounding. And I think people are going to really learn a lot. Typically, I would say I hope everybody enjoys the program, but I think the subject matter is not one that maybe we would say we enjoy. But what I found so striking as we did research for this exhibition was how much what was happening at that time of World War I, 1917 to 1919, kind of reflects on our day-to-day. So I think it's really, I think we'll learn a lot about ourselves in the program that we're going to be seeing today. So are you ready to go ahead and hop into your PowerPoint, Sue?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And Sue's going to let me know when she's ready to advance slides. So Sue, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you. And thank you. Welcome, everyone. And it is a pleasure for me to be able to work in cooperation with the museum to do this presentation today. It's a great way to spend a wintry day. So welcome all. I opened this presentation with this magazine cover from Leslie's magazine, and it features our foreign wars, of course, from 1917 being the last of those when this magazine was published. Next. So I found this quilt on eBay a number of years ago, and anything red, white, and blue, I'm attracted to. So I took a good look at it. And in one corner of this quilt, next, was the date April 6, 1917. And then in the other corner on the bottom was the date November 11th, 1918. And the person that was selling the quilt made the statement that, oh, look, this is when she started the quilt in 1917, and this is when she finished the quilt in 1918. And I shuddered and realized that this person must have slept through World War I history or the 1910s in American history, because those are the dates that the United States entered World War I. And then November 11th, 1918, of course, we all know, those of us that grew up when it was Armistice Day, now we call it Veterans Day. Next. So my earliest recollection is of this photograph of my grandfather, Edward Martin, and it always was on the mantle in my grandmother's farmhouse in Pennsylvania from the very time I was a child there. Next. And then my next kind of recollection of World War I is when my father, who was a World War II veteran, drove the fire trucks in the Memorial Day parade. And World War I veterans were at those parades passing out paper poppies. Next. And this is a stereograph of the contemporary in time to World War I of what the poppy fields looked like. And in 1915, this poem was written up. If you could go back real quick.
Sorry.
Yep. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses row and row that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. Now, there are some of us that had to memorize this poem when we were in grade school. Next. And then when my son was stationed in Europe, we traveled in the Low Countries in France, and there were these croppings of cemeteries that were peppered around amidst the fields, and you know, where the cornfields and the wheat fields, and the fields where the cows were grazing. Next. So this is an image of all of the cemeteries that dot the landscape in the Low Countries throughout the Low Countries in France and Europe. And there are 956 of these cemeteries, and they are maintained today by the Commonwealth War Grave Commission. Next. So my next kind of recollection of World War I is this quilt. This quilt was owned by our neighbor in Ohio when we lived there in the 1980s. And if you take a look at it, it is a tied comfort. The pattern is called Hole in a Barn Door or Churn Dash. And there are woolen ties to this quilt. And the story that went with this was my neighbor's recollection. She said that her sister was engaged to a World War I soldier. And on his way to France, he visited them in Ohio, and they needed a bed cover for the cot that he was going to be sleeping on. So they quick tied this comfort with the yarn that they were using to knit the socks that were then going to go to the World War I veterans or World War I soldiers that were fighting in France. Next.
Oh, excuse me.
That's okay. Yep.
There we go.
So one of the ways that women helped the Red Cross during World War I was to knit. And most people remember that from the World War I era. Next. And Modern Priscilla published this centerfold, and it gave directions to making helmets, socks, gloves, scarves, and vests for World War I soldiers. Next. So World War I is often a forgotten war. Over 4.7 million American men and women served in the armed forces during World War I. 2.8 million were serving overseas. There were 53,000 plus American soldiers that were killed.
Sue, we've lost your voice.
Okay.
Can you check and see?
Hang on, Carolyn. I'm still
We can't hear you.
I'm hearing Sue okay, Carolyn. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Carolyn, I think this is your audio.
Can you try again, Sue, and see if we can hear you?
Are you good?
No,
can hear
I
you.
am not hearing Sue at this point.
Okay.
They can all hear Sue, but they can't hear, but it's on your end.
It's on my, Sue, evidently they're hearing you and they're not hearing me. Why don't you go ahead? I can hear you and advance the slide. So why don't you go ahead?
All right, thank you. So there were 53,000 American soldiers that were killed in action in World War I. There were over 63,000 deaths from
if you give me a sign, Sue, wave when you want me to advance, then I'll know.
Okay. 63,000 deaths from disease and other causes, and about 205,000 that were wounded. And World War I was a very different war. We had tanks. It was a kind of the collision of wars the way they were fought historically, on horseback and with dirigibles. There were airplanes, trenches and barbed wire, and gas. And a lot of the injuries occurring during World War I were the result of the gas. And another. And this is a commemorative picture of the London Tower in 2014. And there are over 888,000 ceramic poppies that were planted at the London Tower to honor those from England that lost their lives in World War I. But in order to give context to World War I want to put that time period in the decade in which it occurred, because the 1910s were a very, very vibrant decade during American quilt making, and it's often an overlooked time period. So I just want to talk a little bit about what American women were up to in the 1910s and what their quilt making was like. So they were involved in the temperance movement, and I absolutely love this picture. I think everyone will maybe get a chuckle out of it. It was what they called their holy war, the temperance movement. And there are many quilts that have association with that movement: the drunkard's path, the temperance tree, the goblet quilts. Although we don't have strong validation historically for connecting these with the temperance movement, we do know that the WCTU was involved in quilt making to raise money for their movement during this time period. And also the suffrage movement, which also includes the right to vote and also temperance. And this is a set of cards that were published during the 1900s and the 1910s regarding suffrage. And you can see them online, you can find them on eBay. The Smithsonian may even have a collection, but they're really funny. These are some of my favorites. And this Where, oh where is my wandering wife tonight? And then my absolute favorite is the Suffragette Madonna, which I think is a hoot. And then women made the suffrage flags. They're actually quilts. They're appliqued with stars, and some of them are quilted, but they were made as banners for their meetings. I love this particular card because this woman is going out to vote and support the election, even though she did not have the right to vote at that time period. And here we have a group of women who are demonstrating to get the right to vote, and President Wilson is addressed in this photograph. He was the president then. And they also marched for peace during World War I. So I want to talk a little bit about the kind of quilts that women were making in the 19 teens. They were still making wool quilts. They were making crazy quilts, and these are all dated quilts, so I know from whence they came. They were making quilts with those wonderful cadet blues, those indigos, and those Garibaldi reds. They were making flannel and tobacco silk quilts. They were really making redwork quilts. This particular one is from Canada. And they were making quilts with thousands of pieces. So all of the quilts that they were making in the 1890s and the 1900s, they were still making right through the 1910s. And this is a photograph of the American Print Company. This was published in their catalog. They're located in Fall River, Massachusetts. In 1910, they were the largest print works company in the world. And you can see remnants.
Your audio file on through Zoom.
You can.
I don't know why, but it just stopped. I have to keep an eye on her so she can. I know.
Okay.
Anyway,
somebody's talking. Oh, okay. So I just want to page quickly through these pages in the catalog, so you can see that the fabric that they were printing during that time period is fabric that was printed for the 2 decades prior to that. So if you want to go through those quickly, Carolyn, we've got lots of indigos. Lots of indigos, even more indigos. Indigos and reds, indigos and whites. And then we have the reds, lots of reds. And you all of you who are appraisers and quilt historians love these colors, and you see them in your quilts. The morning prints were very popular, the morning grays. The shirtings. And more of the grays, the lighter grays. And this is an example of this is actually a fragment with the American flag. And this particular quilt is dated 1919. And you can see the date is pieced in up on the edge of that quilt. And there's a close-up of that. So another place that I look for information about fabrics of the time are the Sears Roebuck catalogs. These are all online on Ancestry. You can actually page through every page in these catalogs and do research. They're amazing. So here are some of the pages that you might see, and this one is from 1917, 1918. And you see the indigos and the reds and the shirtings. And And turkey red, the turkey red fabric was still very popular. And you can even look to see the comforting pages. There were a lot of comforters sold and material for comforters and batting. This particular quilt is called Lover's Knot, and it's got the cadet blues and the reds and then the white. And it's just an awesome pattern. This is faded to the 1900s. This is another quilt, a basket quilt, and we'll do a close-up of that. And there you can see the date on that. That's 1913. And you see the clarets and the morning prints and the indigos. And a tree pattern quilt. Some people call this a temperance tree. Other people might call it a tree of life. And then this is a wonderful fan quilt with all of those colors. Now, if I was appraising this quilt or documenting this quilt, I would probably date it to the 1930s, 40s. It's a crazy quilt, but when you look at the fabric and they're all silk, you might think it was from a later time period, but this one is dated 1914. And one of the questions I get as an appraiser or a documenter is, was this made on a treadle sewing machine? So when I looked at those Sears catalogs, I thought to myself, well, what clued me in was first this postcard. The postcard on the left is dated 1917. It's obviously a treadle sewing machine. And then the one on the right is an ad from 1918, and that is an electric sewing machine. So I went and looked at the Sears catalogs, and there were 17 pages of sewing machines in the Sears catalogs from the World War I era.
Sorry, folks, bear with us just a second. Looks like Sue has frozen here, so hopefully she will reconnect shortly. Sorry about that. Okay, Sue, you need to unmute. It looks like you're back with us.
Great. Okay, is that good?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so I don't know where we left off, but when I looked through the Sears catalogs, all the 17 pages of Sears sewing machines were all treadle. So it's a good bet that those quilts that were done prior to 1920 are mostly done on treadle sewing machines or hand piece. And another way to determine the popularity of the treadle and how long it was around is this is a Boyd needle case. These used to sit, and if you go one more, Carolyn, these used to sit on the counters of dry goods stores, and they dispense sewing machine needles and shuttles. There are 98 sewing machines listed on this case, which I thought was amazing. And this is dated, this particular shuttle case is dated 1910. And there's a close-up of that. And then in 1910, I have what I think is the first national quilt show that occurred. The only reason why I have knowledge of this is because the winner came from Connecticut. It was sponsored by the Ready Sewed Batting Company of Cincinnati, Ohio. And the quilts that were that were entered for the competition, and the competition was nationwide, had to have a connection with the Revolutionary War. There had to be a relative that served in the Revolutionary War. And Mary A. Beers is the maker of this quilt. She was the daughter of Silas Beers of Stratford, Connecticut. He was a drummer in the Revolutionary War. And there's a close-up of that. It is what we call a mariner's compass quilt. And these are some of the articles that I found in newspapers in 1909 and 1910 from all over the nation sponsoring this ready-sewed batting company competition. And ready-sewed batting was batting that was already sewn, so it didn't shift. It was sewn with a grid, so it stayed stable within your tied comfort. And this is another example of a centerfold from that time period. This is a juried show. So they were starting to do juried competitions during that time period also. And I thought this is an interesting headline for an article. It suggests a colonial revival of patchwork quilts. And, you know, those of us now looking back think that they were always making quilts, but there may have been a lull, and now it was being revived. This Wallace netting print is, Wallace was from Connecticut, and you can see that the ladies there are in a bedroom in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and they are stitching on a quilt. And that's another example of the colonial revival of the 1900s. And then this is an embroidered piece that is dated to 1916, and it was from a postcard, and you see an embroidered spread there. H. Cole Phillips published these prints, and you know, as an appraiser, if I saw these quilts, I would probably date them to the 1920s, but they actually date to the mid-1910s. Now, in addition to all the old style quilts that were being made, we had these new entrepreneurial quilt designers that were entering the scene of quilt making. Marie Webster was one of those. She designed Sunbonnet Lassies in 1912, and she published her book, Quilts, Their Stories, and How to Make Them in 1915. The Wilkinson sisters published widely in newspapers in the mid-19 teens, and they made what we call boudoir quilts. And this is an example of their quilt that they call the Queen Anne quilt. And it was a two-sided quilt, and there's the other side. And then, of course, Ruby Short McKim started her quilt designing in the 19 teens also. And this is her Mother Goose quilting, which was one of her first quilts that she designed. And then World War I happened. And now keep in mind, World War I started in Europe in 1914, but we did not get involved in the war until 1917. And this is a postcard from that time period. And these are the flags of the Allied nations, and they show up a lot in quilts. This is a cigar silk quilt, and you see the Allied flags there in the center. And then these silks were wrapped around cigars, and they were an incentive or a bribe for wives who had to tolerate their husband's smoking of cigars. But women incorporated these in their quilt making. This particular quilt, and this is a detail of it because the images are really small on the bigger version, but this particular quilt is from England, and then the center is the silk with the Allied flags. And tobacco flannel quilts were also popular during this time period. And they started around the 1900s, and then right up until World War I, and then they lost popularity after that. And this is a close-up of a detail of another quilt from that time period. And there are pennants with some of the ships that were that fought in World War I on the border. And then this is a centerfold from another magazine. The patchwork quilt is here again, more beautiful than ever. A new old war work for long winter evenings. Most of you who take a look at this, your eye will go to the swastika. Keep in mind that that was meant goodwill and good wealth prior to World War II. And then after World War II, of course, it got banned because it became the symbol of the Nazis. And then this is another article from, I believe it was in Modern Priscilla. But what caught my attention about this is calling the quilts into service for our country. And on the bottom right, you can see those puff quilts. And this is an example of one of those. It's now in the collection of the museum. And they were made to, they were filled with all kinds of things, remnants from old clothing and sometimes even newspaper. There's a close-up of that. And they were made to conserve on wool and cotton that was going to the war effort. So these were encouraged to have quilt makers make these instead of using up cotton and wool that would go to the war effort. This is a particular, this particular quilt is from Canada. And it not only is it dated to 1915, but it also is a victory quilt. And so we often think of victory quilts in terms of World War II, but this is a victory quilt from World War I. So I believe that's when they were actually started. And there you see the different symbols of Canada and Britain, the Canadian flag, the British flag, and the bulldog, which is their mascot. The date's 1915. This cover, so sweet, is maybe was inspired by Rosie O'Neill. Rosie O'Neill is a designer of, and she was the originator of Kewpie. Let me get my battery. Is going. And she has a doughboy in this particular quilt. And there is the Kewpie quilt. Let me check my battery here. Make sure I'm plugged in. Okay, next. And this is the Kewpie side. So right before World War I, Rosie joined forces with the Royal Needlework Academy in England to publish her patterns. And that is why you start to see all the wonderful Kewpie designs. And this is another Kewpie, and there you see him with the Union Jack flag. So now we want to talk about the quilts from the wartime. And this is a small quilt with the applique horse in the center. This quilt was on exhibit at the Virginia Quilt Museum and at the Norfolk Maritime Museum. And it is now in the collection of the Maritime Museum. That area of Norfolk is where all of the horses that were shipped to France were boarded before they were put on ships and sent across the Atlantic. And so I was very happy that they were able to accept this quilt into their collection. And then this is an example of, these are actually embroideries on silk. The designs, I believe, were stamped on. They were done by a company in New York. And these are wonderful print designs meant to be embroidered. Here we have the Blue Star flag. And then the American flag and America, I Love You. and then our victors, and you have the doughboy and the sailor during World War I and the Patriot Shield. And then Uncle Sam with our soldiers. So I love these covers that were published during the war. They just tug at your heartstrings. Some of them are actually the covers of music that was published during that time period also. And this is a quilt that is a radiating star quilt. On the back of this is embroidered 1917, made for my son T. Cox. And what's interesting about this, and this is on exhibit at the museum right now, is that the blue in this quilt is very unstable. By the time America joined the war, we did not have access to good blue dye. We historically got most of our blue dye from Germany. And of course, the war had been going on now for a couple of years. So my guess is we exhausted our blue dye supply and tried to make our own blue dye. But this is a very unstable blue in this quilt, and it can never, ever be washed. There are places on it where you can see a little bit of bleed from the blue where it has bled into the red. And this is a quilt that is just extraordinary. It was made by a woman named Emma Hembry of Cumberland City, Kentucky. And I think it's Kentucky, Tennessee, it might be Tennessee. Anyway, this is just south of the oops, if you can go back, Carolyn. Okay. So this is just right near actually Fort Campbell. So Emma pieced this quilt, and if you look at the dates, she started this quilt on May 7th, 1917, and finished this quilt about 6 weeks later on June 21st, 1917. These are all pieced letters, and this is a psalm, and it is also a hymn. And it's a hymn that was sung at the funerals of soldiers from the Civil War and from World War I. Near My God to Me is the name of the song. And I have not been able, there are Hembrys in Cumberland City. I have not been able to validate the connection between losing someone in the war and this quilt. But obviously there is a connection. And when you think about it, it probably took about 6 weeks to get a body back from France or wherever this soldier that was a family member was killed. And so maybe that's why Emma was in such a hurry to get this quilt done. But it is an incredible quilt, and it is in the collection of the museum, and it is on exhibit. So the Blue Star flag is kind of like a banner, and it was initiated during World War I. An Army captain named Robert Quisner designed the flag, and after the war, President Wilson designated the Blue Star Mothers as an official national foundation and organization. He also designated the Gold Star Mothers as an official organization. So if you have a Blue Star flag flying in your home, it means that you have a loved one deployed. If it's gold, it means that they have been killed in action. If any of you ever see this quilt actually finished, I would love to have a picture of it because it's an amazing pattern. And you know, it would be tempting to make it someday, but this was published in the 1920s. And this is a flag, a Blue Star and Silver Star quilt. It is all wool. It was done by machine, and we can have a close-up of that. So they had these embroidery machines during the war that were used for industrial purposes. This one is for infantry and army. You've got the blue star, and then you have a silver star. And a silver star means that you have a loved one missing in action or injured in action. This is a tie comfort. It is now in the collection of the museum. I have only ever seen 3 others like this. 2 are in the collection of the World War I Museum, and 1 is in the collection of a museum in Illinois. This is a Gold Star flag. It was made by a Mrs. Peck of Omaha, Nebraska. She made this quilt in memory of her son, Fred, who was killed in France 8 days before the armistice. She named her quilt When a Blue Star Turns to Gold. Mrs. Peck was one of the first Gold Star mothers to visit her son's grave in France in the 1920s. I thought y'all would enjoy that, since we're connecting with a Nebraska museum right now. And then I was at the Quilters Hall of Fame a few years ago doing appraisals with the World War I quilts on exhibit. And a gentleman brought me this quilt to take a look at. His grandmother made this quilt. She and a number of the ladies from Indiana had a cottage industry of making uniforms for the World War I soldiers. And with the scraps that they all provided her, she made this quilt. In the center, you see she dated it 1914 to 1918. And then they all put their initials on the quilt. And I think we have a close-up. There's a close-up of the center. And the backing. So it's all World War I uniform material. And then this is a crazy quilt from that time period. And it's just a detail. The rest of the quilt, there is a poppy on that. There was a lot of fundraising that went on during World War I. Here is one quilt that is from Michigan. It is dated 1917. And there's a close-up of that. And then in my own town, they had the what they call the Sister Susies. They did a lot of fundraising during World War I. I live in a really small town still. It's about 3,000 people. During the war, it was about 2,000 people, but there were 100 men from my town that served in World War I. And here's some examples of their fundraising. This is another quilt that it was made by a church group in Pennsylvania, and it is got the initials of President Woodrow Wilson embroidered on this quilt, and Governor Martin Brumbaugh, who was the governor of Pennsylvania at the time. And it is dated December 11th, 1918. And this is a fundraising quilt also. It's turkey red, except that they must have run out of the turkey red, because there is some what we call Congo red at the top that the colors just ran away. But if you look at a close-up of that, it was made for an event that was run by the WCTU. It is from Denver, Colorado. And the people that were important in the WCTU historically, their names are embroidered on this quilt. Francis Willard, Carrie Nation, William Jennings Bryan, Neil Dowd, and Lady Somerset. And on this quilt is also embroidered "Our Boys, Victory, USA." You see that the names in blue are soldiers in the war, and then some of those men lost their lives in the war. and they're depicted with the gold star. Now, I was accused of sending this to the long armor because you can see there is edge to edge continuous line quilting in this quilt. That is actually contemporary to the quilt. There was an ability during World War I to do exactly what we do today with our quilts and sending them to a long armor, go from edge to edge and do continuous line quilting. So this is an image from Camp Funston in Fort Riley. And this is where the first cases of the Spanish flu came to America. This is an image from Fort Riley that depict our soldiers in a barracks that were suffering from the flu. And I love this graph. It's shows the flu epidemic. It got its start in October of 1918, and then it peaked. This is a very, very short time period, about 8 weeks. It peaked and then it decreased in December, and then it had another little spike in February and March. This was the H1N1 flu, the swine flu that reoccurred in the 1970s, if you all remember that. And but in 1918, it was just devastating to the world. And the people that were afflicted most were not the young and the old. It was the 20 to 40-year-olds. So it left many, many orphans in the United States. This is an image of a soldier who brought the flu home to his wife, and she passed away, but he survived. And this is an interesting graph to show the cities that were most affected by the flu, and for the number of weeks that it from the beginning to what they call the 26-week period. And this is an image that is all too familiar today, unfortunately. Who would have guessed that this would all be reoccurring in our country's history? So when I see a quilt like this, I always get concerned. This is a quilt that's dated 1916. It is a tie comfort. It was made by Sarah Bumbaugh. She was from Pennsylvania, from the center of Pennsylvania. And people around that area would call this a HAP, H-A-P-P. If you look at the top, there is what we call a whisker cloth that was attached to the cloth to prevent the whiskers of whoever the recipient was from wearing the one end of the quilt. This quilt is in mint condition. It's very heavy. It's all wool. It's a tie comfort. It's got a tobacco flannel flag on it. And there's a close-up. This was made by Sarah in a leap year. My guess is for her hope chest. And there's an image of the flag, the tobacco flannel flag, and then the whisker cloth. And not only did Sarah make one, she made another one. And she put her age on here. She was 16 in 1916. And she made this second tie comfort. And again, there is a whisker cloth that is attached to the top of that. So the question is, and we can speculate forever until we find more better research, that why is this unused? Because these are utilitarian quilts. Why were they put away for 100 years? Did she die, or her intended die in the war, or from the flu? We may never know, but it's not a far reach to wonder why these quilts were never used. And if you all remember the Velveteen Rabbit, that was written in the 1920s, and it was about malaria, but it also can apply during the World War I era. We did not have antibiotics yet, and This is a great quilt. I think it's on exhibit right now. I still have no idea where the embroideries have come for this, but we'll show you some close-ups. Dirty hands carry disease and germs. Before meals and after toilet, wash your hands. Use hot borax soap suds for soothing antiseptic and regular foot baths. And avoid soft drinks. Here we have the connection to World War I. There's a doughboy in uniform. And then a good American strives to gain and maintain vigorous health, with the United States embroidered on that, and help the Red Cross and comfort broken humanity. Oh, this quilt just tugs at my heartstrings. And there's just so much that is said, particularly after we've all just gone through so much of what this quilt is referencing. So women were involved in a lot of other things. There was the Women's Land Army, and they, were planting their victory gardens, and they were out working in the fields. They were working in the defense industries. They were keeping the home fires burning, and they were also Red Cross workers. Now, you may interpret this as a Red Cross nurse. She is not. This is how they got dressed to go to pack the barrels, to make the bandages that were going to go to the front lines. They had these sanitary white costumes or outfits that they wore when they went to work in the Red Cross centers. Here's images of some of the land army, and then the Red Cross worker again. And this is a iconic image of the Red Cross worker and Uncle Sam. And you'll see images like this appear on quilts. I love this particular image. This used to be the Bridge Club. And I mean, this might have been one of our greatest benevolent efforts ever in the 20th century, even surpassing World War II. Here you have a Red Cross quilt that was made, and then the Red Cross workers and the amount that was raised during the war for the Red Cross. And then this is an image of a Red Cross worker. Obviously, this quilt was made as a fundraiser or to exhibit at a Red Cross center. Even children got involved, and they would do knit quilts, and these were very popular during the war. And then you see that one patch quilt that was made also. And then this is a series of photographs from Commerce, Georgia. Took me a while to figure out which Commerce it was, but because that was what was written on the back of the card. But it is a fundraising event for the Red Cross. You see the quilts in the background, the doughboys that have come to the event, and also they brought their band to entertain the public. And then you see the quilting bee that's going on. This photograph is amazing. This church is no longer standing. It has been rebuilt, but the community, the church community, is still located in Commerce, Georgia. So modern Priscilla is responsible for probably the most iconic quilt of World War I. She published this pattern in 1917, and the first quilt that was made with this pattern was documented in Arizona. Then we documented the second one that was known in Connecticut, and now a ton of them have come out in the public. Most of them are in museums. This particular one is from Central Ohio. People would pay money to have their name signed on the quilt, and then oftentimes it would be raffled. Many of them are not well made because they were made quickly to raise money for the Red Cross. In the center of this quilt, it has the soldiers from Central Ohio that served in World War I. And then this block is dedicated to a Civil War company from Ohio. This is another Ohio-based Red Cross quilt and a variation. And you see many, many variations. This one is from Burbank, Ohio, and it is dated 1918. This one is from Rutland, Vermont, and the signatures on this have not been embroidered, they're penciled in. This particular one is from, was made by a woman named Sinani Beauty of Greene County, Virginia. And we have a photograph of Sinani later in life. And then this one, for the benefit of our brave boys, was made by Adonna Mae Kiesling of Sugar Grove, Virginia. And she raised $111 with the making of this quilt. This particular quilt, I could never find the provenance on this, but obviously another variation of that Red Cross design. And then this is a photograph of Forrest Leedy of Walla Walla, Washington, displaying his World War I quilt at the Bicentennial in Washington State. This particular quilt was, the photograph was provided to me by Cindy Adams of Colorado. And people assigned their name on these stars that were went between the crosses. And then these red crosses are embroidered or appliqued in the center of blue star flags, another variation. And then this one is a Red Cross quilt from the Lovely Lane Methodist Church in Baltimore, Maryland. And it encompasses the many, many images that you find that are associated with World War I. The Madonna Mother with the soldier at her feet. You've got the Patriot Shield, the Blue Star flag in this quilt. The roll call, the Statue of Liberty, the Patriot Shield, and then the Doughboy. Again, the Statue of Liberty, and the names of the men who served in the war are all embroidered on this quilt. And then Uncle Sam, and in the trenches at home, and here you have the people working the fields and keeping the home fires burning. And then another quilt that was in the red and white exhibit that was the Joanna Rose collection, which is now in the collection of the International Quilt Museum, is this one. It was made in Newburgh, New York, which is just above West Point. You've got the Red Cross in the center, and then these wonderful embroideries. And you can keep going, Carolyn, with the photographs. You see West Point, Yonkers.
This is such an incredible quilt, and I'm sorry to say that we are at the end of our hour. I want to thank you so much for your presentation today. There are so many comments in the chat saying how this has brought history to life for them, and I would echo that. It's just been phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Is there a closing thought that you could leave us with today?
I think that it's important for quilt makers to know, particularly those of you that are quilting for Quilts of Valor, that what you are doing today to heal and to comfort our military and our veterans is something that American quilt makers have been doing since the Revolutionary War. And you are carrying on a wonderful tradition. And I am deeply grateful. And I know that our veterans and our military are also. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. That is just fantastic. And everyone can learn more about the exhibition at internationalquiltmuseum.org. And if you have questions that we didn't get to today, you can send them to me in an email at textiletalks@saqa.art. So that's SAQA.art. And I'll make sure we get them to Sue and get you an answer. Next week's talk is a QSOS, Quilters Save Our Stories interview with artist Dolores Vitero Presley, and that's presented by Quilt Alliance. And you can find the link to register for that and also recordings of over 175 past textile talks at saqa.com/textile talks. We'll see you next week, next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And thank you so much. And thank you to our sponsors. I'll just play our sponsors here and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.